What year is it?
2016.
2016.
2016.
2016.
Right now?
Yeah.
2016.
Wrong.
Kräftige Quote davon, fast 300 Jahre, ja, sind Phantomzeit.
The phantom time hypothesis was first proposed by Heribert Illig of Germany in 1991. Illig noticed that a number of medieval documents appeared to be forged, and thus developed his theory around this. He became one of the few scholars who studied and wrote about the phantom time hypothesis and the public face of the idea.
I mean, you always had, and I don't want to say forged necessarily, but you would have documents in books that would be ascribed to other authors. There's a text that we have from the late Roman period called the Rhetorica ad Herennium, which is a rhetorical text that was attributed to Cicero, the Roman orator, and for hundreds of years. And then it became very obvious that no, this actually isn't Cicero. Somebody stuck his name on it. And so that occurred quite commonly.
In the Middle Ages, it was a widespread belief that Christ would return to rule over the earth in the new millennium, which would be the year 1000 for the people of the time. The theory states that in circa 700 AD, Emperor Otto III decided that he would be able to speed up the second coming of Christ by simply deciding it would be the year 1000. In order to make it seem realistic, Otto created an ancestor for himself, Charles the Great, or Charlemagne. Charlemagne was fabricated as a link between the foreign emperor and his people in order to gain their trust, and make it seem as though the great Charlemagne was passing the torch to Otto.
So if Charlemagne were made up, it would be really hard to figure out how the continent of Europe became unified in this practice. Because again, before Charlemagne's time, Christianity existed, but it existed in a few pockets and was often fought by the government rulers or the military rulers, who of course wanted to be the sole source of authority themselves. They didn't want people looking to some supernatural source of authority. They wanted locals to be following their rule. And so Christianity would be fought or oppressed in many of the places where it was trying to spread across Europe. But when it has the approval of the emperor, well, then it can spread quite easily and far.
You also have the issue of Anglo-Saxon England. Not only did Charlemagne not exist, Alfred the Great couldn't have existed. And Alfred the Great was the one who actually stopped the Viking invasions of England, establishing the Danelaw and preserving Anglo-Saxon culture, at least for a while, in England.
Timekeeping has always been a guessing game on the part of those in power throughout centuries. Not long before the reign of Emperor Otto III, when it was decided that the calendar would be reworked again with the year of the birth of Jesus Christ, those creating the calendar counted back by Olympics, which, even then, were held every 4 years. But there was an emperor who ruled for a very short period of time during one of the Olympics, and these Olympics were disregarded because of the forgotten emperor. Therefore, it is believed that Jesus Christ was in fact born in the year 4 AD, as opposed to the year 0. This means that it would be conceivable for time to be altered without citizens so much as noticing.
So for most of the history of the world, time was very much a local phenomenon. If you wanted to know when the middle of the day was, you stuck a stick in the dirt, and when there was no shadow, that's the middle of the day. And if you wanted to know what time you're supposed to get up in the morning, it's when the sun comes up. And what time you're supposed to go to bed at night, it's when the sun goes down. So for most of human existence, time was a very local phenomenon, and in my town, time might have been different from what it was 50 miles away or 100 miles away.
I mean, most of them were inaccurate. Our own calendar method is inaccurate. That's why we have leap year. One of the reasons for the switch from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar was that slippage of the solstice, because the solstice was where and the calendar was controlled by the Catholic Church, and so everything in the yearly calendar depended on the fixed date of Easter. And so that slippage of the solstice away from Easter was one of the reasons why very, very late after the Middle Ages, we had that shift to the Gregorian calendar.
Theorists claim that in a pre-modern society, fabricating a few centuries would have been fairly easy, as there were no public libraries or universal education. Also, at that time, there was a decline in literacy in Europe. Due to a lack of education among the general population, theorists believe it would have been very easy for the church and monarchy to misinform the lay people.
To do that would require coordination among a lot of very, very separate groups. So you would have, who was it, Otto III, the emperor, is that who it was, who purportedly did this. But the Holy Roman Emperor would had to have coordinated with the Pope, certainly. They would have had to have coordinated with the Byzantine Empire, who would have had to have coordinated with the Middle East, beyond the Byzantine Empire. And then all of that would have had to be coordinated with Anglo-Saxon England. It's a lot of coordinations for a time that's known as the Dark Ages.
If these years were really fabricated, what would that mean for our modern society?
I don't know, that would be pretty cool. We'd still be like in the Baroque era and stuff. Is that Baroque?
It wouldn't change a thing. It would just be a different year, probably. I mean, the only reason that a year is because we recognize it as such. The only reason time is because we recognize it as such. So it wouldn't matter. It'd just be saying it'd be giving a different name to a different time that we believe in.
The moon landing being faked would have been easier to do. I mean, evidence to the contrary certainly exists, and this would be in the form of astronomical observations. We have recorded events, eclipses especially, in comets, Halley's Comet in fact, which are recorded because they were considered important heavenly events. And so people record them and record what year they were occurring in. That would require a coordination not just among these higher levels of power, but down to the civic administration, in little towns and villages.
The sheer power and control that a ruler had to have over his people in order to forge an entire 300 years. Perhaps the Mayans were right and the world will end in the year 2012, but we simply haven't reached it yet. We have no way of knowing. So perhaps it is currently the year 1719. What else don't we know? It's about time we learned the truth.
Do you believe that this was at all plausible or that this theory has any academic merit?
No and no. It's a conspiracy theory. I don't think it would have been possible.
Party like it's 1719.